As the unrest in Libya continues, divisions are emerging over whether or not to arm opposition fighters. The international coalition met in London to discuss the country's political future. The US and Britain seem ready to supply arms, but NATO is not. Is this move even legal? Will arming anti-Gaddafi forces work? And if it doesn't succeed, what is the fallout? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. As Muammer Gaddafi's military pounds opposition fighters into retreating from Ras Lanuf, international debate moves on to arming the ragtag band seeking to bring down Gaddafi and outlining a vision for the future of the war-torn country. On Tuesday, foreign ministers and leaders from over 40 countries and organisations, including the UN, the Arab League, the Organisation of the Islamic Conference, the European Union and NATO, met for what was billed as the London Conference on Libya. British Foreign Secretary William Hague outlined its three-point conclusion: to implement UN Security Council resolutions 1970 and 1973, while enforcing the restrictions and sanctions imposed by the UN Security Council against the Gaddafi regime. Preparing for Libya's future, the participants recognised the need for all Libyans to begin an inclusive political process through which they can choose their own future. And supporting the people of Libya, it was agreed to establish a Libya contact group to provide leadership and overall political direction for the international effort. Qatar will convene the first meeting of the group as soon as is possible. But behind the scenes, there are those who believe a different approach is needed if the crisis in Libya is not going to end in a stalemate. The US indicated that it hadn't ruled out arming the rebels. Critics say this is illegal under a UN-imposed arms embargo. But it seems that the US Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, has opened the door to providing arms.
It is our interpretation that 1973 amended or overrode the absolute prohibition of arms to anyone in Libya, so that there could be legitimate transfer of arms if a country were to choose to do that. As I said, we have not made that decision at this time.
To discuss all of this, our three guests in Washington, D.C., David Mack. He's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs and a former U.S. Ambassador to Libya. In Cairo, Abdullah al-Ashal, he was the assistant to the former Egyptian Foreign Minister and is currently a professor of international law at the American University in Cairo. And here in Doha, Ali Asawi, he was Libya's economic minister, was then ambassador to India before quitting a month ago to join the opposition. He's effectively the foreign minister for the Libyan Transitional National Council. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with you, Mr. Asawi. Do you think Hillary Clinton means that she could legitimately transfer arms to you, the opposition, if that's what you're asking for?
Our understanding to the resolution 1973 that some explanations for this resolution, it can be a possibility to provide arms to the Libyans to defend themselves.
But what has she been saying to you? Has she confirmed to you that this is what she is going to do?
Well, we didn't ask officially for arms up to date, but I think if the aggression continued against the Libyans, we have the right to have the all means to defend our people, and the Libyans should have the right to defend themselves.
Ambassador David Mack, what do you read into this? A bit of a about turn as far as US policy is concerned, isn't it?
Well, I don't think the question is really whether there is legal authority to do this. I think that the second UN Security Council resolution authorizing all necessary measures gave legal authority to member states. However, there really is a question in my mind, which I'd like my friend Ali Asawi to address, and that is, why should anybody give more weapons and more sophisticated weapons to military forces which have so far shown themselves to be disorganized, untrained, and undisciplined. They already have quite a few weapons. They had surface-to-air missile, for example. We know this because they shot down a Libyan warplane, but it turned out the Libyan warplane was one of their own that had defected to the rebels. So at this point, I think there's a burden on the Transitional National Council, of which Ali Asawi is a part, to demonstrate to the international community that they have forces that have the training, or to take measures to get that kind of training,
okay,
which they could do from their neighbor.
Okay, Mr. Asawi, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would like to mention that it's not a priority to have arms and to fight, but we have the right to protect our people. If the resolution 1973 and the resolution 1970, before that, in these resolutions there was mention about the ceasefire very clearly. Gaddafi didn't comply with that. So aggressions continued against the Libyans.
Yeah, but the question is if your supporters are capable of using these weapons if they were to get them.
Yeah, I will let me continue. And if these resolutions was imposed and the article of protection of civilians was imposed and was implemented, no need for arms. We don't ask for that for arms itself. We just it's a mean to defend themselves.
Okay, Mr. Al-Ashal, can you clear up this issue up for us? Is it legal? And if it is indeed legal, as David Mack believes it is, then what is the next step?
On the legal level, I think there is no legal obstacle or legal hindrance to support the rebels. I can understand from the overall reading of the resolutions adopted by the Security Council, especially in 1973, and all the statements which had been pronounced by all the officials in NATO and in the United States and other states allied, that they wanted two targets. The first one to support and protect the rebels, and secondly to defeat al-Gaddafi forces. So I think that if they go directly to al-Gaddafi forces, this may give ground for the rebels to advance. But what can I see now is that they make a distance between themselves and the advances made by al-Gaddafi forces. So the rebels now are suffering and they are retreating. So this means to me as an observer and also a practitioner in politics and diplomacy, that these operations want to give a message that at the end of the day, they liberated Libya from al-Gaddafi, and the rebels are disorganized and they have no capacity, and we came to help them, but they are not able to be helped. So it is us, the NATO, who liberated Libya in general, and this is why we also have the capacity or the ability to decide what would be the future of Libya. So I think this is very malicious factor in the situation, and I can see it very well. Of course, the rebels have full right from the international community to be protected from al-Gaddafi, but I want them to trace al-Gaddafi forces so as to give the rebels an ample room for advances, and they are retreating now.
Okay, Ambassador Mack,
excuse
me, jumping in, Ambassador Mack, if this manipulation of Resolution 1973 allows for rebels to start receiving arms from coalition forces, where do you think this is going to leave NATO? NATO is not really supporting this, is it?
Well, in my view, neither NATO nor any other Western countries should be the principal supplier of training and organization to the rebel forces. They ought to get that from Arabs. I don't want to have American boots on the ground in Libya, and frankly, I don't think it would be wise to have European boots on the ground. Libya has a very well-armed well-organized, highly trained neighbor, and that's Egypt. Egypt has plenty of the kind of personnel who can train Libyans to use what they really need, which are anti-tank weapons, because they're not being killed by the Libyan Air Force. We've taken care of that with the no-fly zone. They are being threatened by tanks and artillery. They can defend themselves against that kind of threat with anti-armor weapons if they are trained to use them. And the best people to do that are people who speak Arabic fluently and have the training, and the Egyptian Armed Forces has thousands and thousands of people with that kind of capability. The Libyans ought to be asking for that help from their Arab neighbor.
Would that be acceptable to you, Mr. Sawi? Surely it would be a big problem if any military hardware is provided to Libyans that have a US or a British stamp on it.
Well, it's very clear in 1973 resolution that it's not allowed to have any kind of occupation or forces on the ground or boots on the ground from United States or any other country. It's mentioned there in the resolution, so it's out of question to talk about that. And we don't need that. What we need now is the protection of the civilians, so they can go out, they can express.
But how do you get the protection of civilians without getting boots on the ground?
Yeah, preventing tanks and arms from attacking the people, and troops from killing the people in the street, and so people they can go out and express themselves and ask for their demands. But how do you
provide this street security without arming your supporters?
It should be, we should break the siege around the cities like Musrata, like Zintan, like Tripoli, so we allow the people to go out. We don't seek for fights, we don't seek for arms, we seek for freedom to express ourselves. This is the priority, and it's mentioned in the resolution, protecting the civilians so they can go out. This is the main issue.
So you say you're not seeking arms, but would you be upset if arms suddenly found their way to your supporters?
Well, if the situation deteriorated, you cannot defend this argument long time. People will ask for means to defend themselves, and we will ask for that officially, and to organize national army to defend the people,
okay,
to save the lives. This is I hope we don't go for that. I hope this will end, this massacre and this bloodshed will end soon. And
okay, let me put this to Mr. Al-Ashal. I mean, is it even legal to take sides? Because that's what's been spoken about, isn't it?
No, it is not taking side, because since Gaddafi himself had been accused of being criminal, I think the people in Libya have the full right and they have sovereignty. So in this case, international community is supporting the sovereignty of the Libyan people, and it is incriminating Gaddafi by his acts. It's not a civil war, because this is a crushing operation by the army, official army, and the leader himself against his people. So this is a massacre against them. Even arming the people is not very effective. I think this is propaganda on the part of NATO only. So I want them to defend the Libyan people by tracing al-Gaddafi forces, not by making operations which are unrelated totally from the scene of war between the two parties.
Were no lessons learned, David Mack, in Afghanistan, providing arms to opposition, then having it turned on you?
Absolutely, and that's why we're sending an American diplomat into Benghazi to deal with my friend Ali Asawi and other people there, and find out exactly what their capacities are and what their needs are and who they are, and which factions are actually in control. Personally, I have very high regard for the people that I know in the Libyan Transitional Council in Benghazi, people like Ali Asawi and people like Mahmoud Jabril, people like Omar Tarhouni. These are highly qualified people, but they need to get serious about defending themselves from the Libyan armed forces. They can't expect it all to be done from the air by NATO. they need to equip themselves on the ground, and they can best do that by turning to their Arab neighbors. They don't have to have Egyptian troops come in to their area. They can send some forces across the border into Egypt to be trained
Doesn't this just push
in
the
how to use these
situation
kinds of
into
weapons.
a civil war, though, if it isn't that already?
The whole point is, in order to defend the people in these towns who have clearly expressed their desire to be free of Gaddafi's rule, they need to be able to defend themselves from the real threat. And the real threat is on the ground. If it was coming from the air before, it no longer is.
Okay, Mr. Al-Ashar, let me just put this point to you. Ambassador Mack was saying there that it needs to be Arab nations who are going to step in here. But at the recent London conference, trying to resolve some sort of resolution or put forward some sort of resolution on Libya and a vision forward, Amr Moussa of the Arab League didn't arrive. Only 7 of the 24 Arab League members attended, and even the chair of the African Union failed to arrive. So how is that going to happen then?
Yes, I think the Arabs were supposed to be the protector of the Libyan people, but because we have cleavages in the Arab world concerning the sense of revolution, and some states also are threatened by this revolution, they were hesitant and they were divided. And I cannot ask Egypt, which is passing very critical transitional period, to do anything. And I see our friend from Mr. Mack from the United States is insisting on Egyptian role and involvement in Libya, and I don't think that Egypt is now ready for any involvement anywhere. Egypt is licking its own wounds and trying to get out of the revolutionary case. And I think the Arabs now are scattered among different forces because the NATO itself is trying to take everything in its own hands. And the Arabs now are working under the auspices of the NATO. The United States was distancing itself far away.
You say they're working under the auspices of NATO. Mr. Assawi, who's giving you guidance on this and the political way forward? Is it your Arab neighbors?
We have our National Interim Council, we have meetings, and also we have groups, of Libyans, consultancy groups. We are discussing our issue and taking our decision regarding that.
At the Libyan conference, you were all discussing about the way forward for your country. Is it all reliant now on determining what the end game is likely to be? Because there's still no clarity on that.
We hope this situation will not take a long time, and we hope this aggression stop. You can see that there is escalation of using forces against the Libyans. We hope this will end soon. This is the hope of the Libyans. But if deteriorating, we have to face that, and we have to look for means to stop that.
And I suppose the question as well to you is, what happens if Libyans start turning fire on each other even more so than they have? I mean,
let me explain something.
Who does NATO step in and support there?
Yeah, let me explain something to make it very clear. It's not a civil war in Libya now. The fight is and the war between the Libyans and Gaddafi family. It's not a war between the Libyans themselves. Gaddafi and his sons are fighting the Libyans. This is the situation now. It's not a war between the Libyans. It's not a war between the Libyan tribes and Gaddafi trying to transform this situation to a war between Libyans and the Western countries because of these airstrikes. International community imposed the no-fly zone and protection of the civilians. But this is the situation now. It's the war between Gaddafi and the Libyans.
This seems to be the crisis point or the tipping point now, isn't it, in this Libyan situation? Because something has to move.
That's right. There was an urgent threat to Libyan civilians from the Libyan armed forces, including Libyan aircraft. The United States and other NATO countries got involved on an urgent basis after the Arab League asked us to, and we have prosecuted that part of the defense of the Libyan people to the best extent we can. But we simply cannot deal with Libyan ground forces. That has to be done by the rebels themselves. And they're going to have to get organized to do that, and they'd better look for Arab friends to help them do it.
Are they going to get the Arab friends to help them do it?
Well, I don't know. What I hear from Professor Ishal is not very encouraging. But the United States certainly doesn't want to send its forces onto the ground in Libya, and I don't think that that would be anything the Arab League would want us to do anyway.
So it seems that there's a desire to
get
get weapons on the ground, but the question is who's going to provide them?
Well, don't worry. Once people get trained and once people are organized so that they can use those weapons, then the weapons will find their way. The United States has a very major arms support agreement with Egypt. We provide them with assistance every year. They have lots of weapons in their inventory that could be transferred with U.S. authorization in a matter of days, provided they're transferred to properly trained and organized troops.
And I suppose, Mr. Al-Ashal, the ultimate aim, the end game, which is still to be decided, we touched on briefly, is that about regime change? Has that been cleared up yet?
It seems to me that they are changing their aim now. And I would remind Ambassador Mack from the beginning that the NATO was in fact behind the scenes. When the Arab League was asked to legalize any international action, especially for a fly zone, the Arab League addressed its authorization to the Security Council. And the Security Council, by hooks or by crooks, had been taken out to be in the NATO hands, first in the Americans, then the French, then the NATO at the end of the day. So I don't think that the Arab world was able or even given the chance to do anything in Libya. It was, I think, many roles had been decided by NATO for the Arab states. So this is why the Arab states are not the one who is deciding the fate of Libya. The one who decides the fate of Libya would be the victorious, the one who liberates Libya from Gaddafi. At the end of the day, Gaddafi would leave, and Gaddafi was the proper ruler for the interests of the West. But because the people and the rebels were against him, and he was crushing them, I think the international conscience was very much touched. And this is why you have to make that balance between the political aspirations of the West to take anything in Libya and the humanitarian interest for the rebels to be protected from the brutalities of Gaddafi.
Okay, Mr. Issawi, in this vision of the way forward, it seems that the US and Britain has accepted that they will have to organize some sort of exile for Gaddafi, or that he'll be allowed into some sort of exile. Would that be acceptable for you?
Well, the question, is it acceptable from Mr. Gaddafi or not? This is the question. Libyans had said this from the beginning, that they would like to see Gaddafi out, and they agreed to give him a way to go out. But he didn't show any signs about accepting that. But contrary to that, he is responding to the meetings of London today by using tanks and using heavy equipments against the Libyans today. You can see it in the news. This is the answer of the Gaddafi, using force and blood shield and massacre in Libya.
Clearly, so many issues still to discuss on this, to touch on about this discussion about arming the opposition or not. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. All three of you.
You're welcome,
David
Jane.
Mack in Washington, D.C., and Abdullah Al-Ashal in Cairo, and here in Doha, Ali Issawi. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye.